Welcome back to Morning Line. Nick Barris coming to you live, and we are on Facebook at newschannel5.com as well as on the Plus right now. Lots of great comments coming in right now that I'll share with everyone on Facebook, and phone calls from our last guests on what's going to happen with restaurants. But as I said, we have a lineup of guests we're going to hit. And as I've said, here in Music City, some of those hit hardest, of course, are musicians. You know, they play music, they tour, they perform for a living, and as we all know, those venues are all shut down. A very, very difficult time for a great many of them. We're going to talk about that and what maybe the reopen means to them and how this goes. This morning we're joined by Manuel Delgado. He's a musician there in East Nashville. He's the owner of Delgado Guitars, and he's kind enough to join us this morning. Can you hear me, sir?
I sure can. Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Good. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. You know, we were just talking to restaurant workers and about the reopen and how that goes. Maybe you could tell us, Manuel, to this point, and your observation, yes, not for yourself, but other musicians in this wonderful musical city, how difficult this has been and what you see happening now with the governor lifting that safe-at-home order. Go ahead, Manuel.
Well, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. I don't know of anybody who really got hit harder than the musicians. And then on top of that, obviously the tornado that ripped through here, you know, a week before, the quarantine. So some musicians directly losing their home and now their livelihood. And what the other challenge I'm seeing now is with so many musicians going to live events. Now there's such an influx of live events that it's, you know, I mean, there's just so much. I'm sure there's so many to choose from, where before you'd drive to one venue or another, but they're doing what they can to try to survive. And I don't know what the future holds for them. I know concerts and festivals and events have been canceled. We have a music venue here, and we've had to cancel everything as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you were maybe referring there to some of the live streaming events, and I'm curious if you see that potentially being some type of a replacement. I don't know how it would be economically, but you know, we've heard about, you know, sporting events, the possibility that maybe some games come back for the NBA or Major League Baseball or hockey, and they're playing in front of empty arenas. Of course, they still have TV revenues and sponsorships. These live streaming musical events, can they be monetized?
I believe yes, they are. They have like tip jars, virtual tip jars, where they can you can support the musicians. But what we're finding is, like, if you have a musician that already has a huge following, then they have a better chance of still being able to do something. But the up and coming musicians, the ones that would rely on going to the venues and actually, you know, being seen by people who didn't know who they were before, and that tip jar, you know, that actual tip jar, well, those musicians are going to have a more difficult chance. And in some ways, I do think that the musicians have those artists have a better opportunity than maybe some of these live sporting events, so to speak, meaning, you know, you were talking earlier about the restaurants and the actual experience of sitting down with somebody and enjoying yourself and being relaxed and having that conversation. It's that experience that you look for. And although going to the music venue is obviously a huge part of that, music is still very important to everybody. Everybody loves music. So you can still have somewhat of that enjoyable experience by getting to hear an artist that maybe you didn't know anything about, or getting to follow that artist that you do love and hearing them live as opposed to their CD or their album.
I agree. I can make the argument right now, Manuel, that music has never been more important. I can't tell you. You can imagine folks sitting at home, listening to their favorite music or seeing something virtual online, and it gets them through the day. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just music, it's arts in general. I mean, if you think of dance and you know, painting, and you're getting to watch these artists do these paintings and you know, as they're actually creating them or crafting, you know, we're starting to do events where we're showing the construction of musical instruments, you know, because that's what I am. I'm a luthier, so we hand make musical instruments, and just reaching the audience in a different way. I think as a small business owner, we have to be scrappy and find new ways to stay relevant and stay afloat, quite honestly. I mean, you know, our clients are musicians and schools, and they're all, you know, closed.
Yeah, that makes it hard, and it's good. I'm glad you mentioned that. Of course, with the guitars that you hand make, I mean, you're a small business owner, and I think you're in the same boat as a lot of other small business owners, but on top of that, you have the added layer that you're a talented musician that performs. So So where do we go from here in your mind? We have this order in place, but it's pretty much clear if you look at any of the phases, the very last phase on every single list are, large crowd events, be it sporting events, concerts, things like this where a lot of people are in close proximity. So that we're looking at, even if that curve really starts going well for us, probably months down the line. How are people going to survive during that time beyond this unemployment and then maybe the stimulus check?
Well, I think personally we're going to see a spike again with this reopening. The short answer for me is I think that it comes down to, I know Dr. Jahangir and others have mentioned, that we have a personal responsibility. And unfortunately, we see people who just are choosing not to wear masks or gloves, and they have that right, but then they obviously can risk endangering other people. So as a small business owner, for us, a family business, we want to create a great experience for our clients, but we also have a right to refuse folks if they're going to choose not to honor that, because I have to think about my staff who are like family to me, and then I have to think about my customers who are like family to me. And if somebody comes in and they're choosing not to wear a mask or gloves and they could risk infecting the next client, then we're just not gonna do that. So we're actually gonna be investing in masks to where if somebody wants to come in and they don't have one, then we'll give them the option of giving them one that they can wear. But the other challenge that we have as a small business owner and being in the musical is we can't wipe down the guitars with rubbing alcohol. It'll ruin the finish.
Wow, right.
So if somebody comes in and tries an instrument, we literally will put that instrument aside for at least 24 hours. Before we'll let anybody else touch it. So, we're doing things. When they walk in, we ask them to wipe their hands down first, and that gives the alcohol time to dry before they play it. But then just to be safe, we have to set that aside. That's something else that people need to think about.
So interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Now, I am not a guitar player, but I was thinking this, and I was going to ask you in that respect, so you can't really get the feel and play a guitar wearing rubber gloves.
Oh, no, absolutely. And, we had a client come in a couple days ago, and he saw an instrument online that he wanted to try. And basically what we did was we cleared everything out except for those 3 instruments that he was interested in, to set up a chair. He came in, I was wearing my mask. Wow. And, we basically monitored everything he did. He used one of our picks. We just gave him the pick to take home. And when he chose his guitar, he took it with him, and the other instruments, we set them aside, and they actually sat for about 48 hours before we picked them up again, wiped them down with naphtha and other things that we know are safer. But because we can't use rubbing alcohol or anything like that, it just has to sit for a while.
I hear you. Well, it's clear you're being incredibly cautious and I think doing the right thing. Would you agree with me, though, that, and while this would be something that would be a violation of the order, if someone somewhere in the state decided to hold a concert on some venue, maybe private property, and maybe had a couple of well-known acts, I believe there would be enough people out there that would actually show up, and there would be a crowd. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're seeing it, in the protests. We're seeing it in other. Not everybody believes that this is, as dangerous as it is or as real as it is. So, there's no cure for people's personal ideas and what they think is okay and not okay. I'll tell you, one of the things that we're looking at doing as a small music venue is basically setting up a live streaming service to where artists can rent out the space in blocks of time and do concerts here with nobody in the space except them and whoever crew they bring in, and then they can try to attract people that way. And then when they leave, same thing, we'd have to go through a whole cleaning service of wiping everything down and setting it up for. But as far as going to a live event, as somebody who has been around music my whole life, and my wife's a songwriter and all my friends are musicians, you won't see me there.
Yeah, I was wondering about this too, though, because I think that's a great idea that you just told me about maybe doing that live event in terms of streaming. But have you seen where there have been some churches that have gone virtual or did drive-in sermons where they had maybe the screen on top of the church and they had the parishioners show up in their vehicles, spaced of course, and they're parking kind of like you would at a drive-in theater, but you're in your car and either the pastor was up on the roof, preaching, or it was on a big screen. I was trying to imagine if a concert could be held in that manner, where people kind of pull into the drive-in setting, but they stay in their vehicles and then they watch. I don't know. Is that something that would work?
Oh, absolutely. And again, the things that you're mentioning, Nick, are ways to be creative. But then you also, again, I'm one of these people that I always believe that as a business owner, you're basically a problem solver. So the first thing, like when you mentioned that, I think of, well, you're going to have a restroom.
Yeah.
People are going to, you know what I mean? So, there you run into an issue. But I will say, like, we belong to the Village Chapel, and they've done an amazing job of doing services online that we've been able to enjoy and still worship on Sundays for us. So, and I know other churches are doing the same thing. It's hard, especially for me. I'm a major extrovert. I love people. I love to, our culture is we hug and greet people. And I mean, it's very strange to not have that connection. And especially when you're seeing people that you're friends with and you're having to have that distance, you almost feel like you're off-putting, like you're, I don't know how to explain it. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
No, listen,
it's a strange
I'm the
sensation.
Same way, something of an extrovert. My wife, the opposite, and is handling it better than I am, but I know what you're saying.
Same here.
And I can tell. Well, listen, I really, Manuel, thank you so much for joining this morning. It gave us some real perspective on where things are going. And, of course, your business remains open. I want people to know that Delgado Guitars, and he'll find a way to let you find a way to sample one of his instruments if you have to, as he just described. Yeah. You be safe, sir.
By appointment.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, all right?
All right. Thank you, Nick. Be safe.
Thank you much. You too. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to take a few of your calls and comments, and then stay tuned. Final segment, we're going to talk about the return of sports. Could it happen? We'll be back with more right after this.